Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look once again at the suggestions passed to the developers for November of 2024. In this video, we're going to be having a look at the naval side of things and also the helicopters, just because it's nice to bunch them together. As always, if you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe and let's get started. The first vehicle is one that I struggle saying, so I apologize. It is a South Dakota class battleship, and it is the USS Massachusetts. This is the BB-59, and also it had a great nickname, which was the Big Mammy. Basically, this was one of 4 South Dakota class battleships, being the 3rd ship of the class to enter service during the Second World War. One of the coolest facts about the Massachusetts is that it holds a unique distinction of being a battleship who suffered no crew casualties during combat throughout the entire war. As is standard for the South Dakota class Massachusetts, it came with a primary armament of 9 16-inch Mark 6 guns in 3 turrets, with 2 in a super firing position at the front of the ship, while the 3rd turret was located at the rear of the ship. The secondary battery consisted of 20 5-inch dual-purpose guns with 10 twin turrets on it, which was more than that of the South Dakota, since the Indiana, Massachusetts, and Alabama were not built as fleet flagships, unlike the South Dakota, which is why the Dakota has a weaker secondary armament. Finally, the Massachusetts AA battery was stronger than that of the South Dakota and also Indiana, meaning it had more anti-aircraft guns as the war went on. It consisted of 24 40mm Bofors in 6 quad mounts, backed up by 35 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft cannons in single mounts when she was completed in 1942. But as the war expanded, as the need for AA on ships expanded, this one also expanded. So it eventually had 72 40mm Bofors in 18 quad mounts and 37 20mm Oerlikons in 1 quad, 1 twin, and 31 single mounts, though in the post-war period they saw the removal of the 20mm guns. Of course, this vehicle was used a lot during the Second World War in many different areas, but also at the same time, it did survive the war. The Massachusetts was saved thanks to her former crew, with a group of them lobbying for the battleship to be preserved as a museum ship, and therefore this vehicle you can already see, and it's pretty cool. So if you are in the area of the Battleship Cove, make sure to check it out. For Britain, we have a J-class destroyer. This is the HMS Javelin, or the G61. This vehicle was one of 8 J-class destroyers, being the last one overall to be launched. It falls under the J, K, and N class umbrella, in total a class of 24 ships. She was ordered in 1937, launched on the 21st of December in 1938, and commissioned into service on the 10th of June of 1939. The JK and N class was supposed to be a smaller follow-on to the Tribals that had preceded them. They incorporated a twin boiler room layout, allowing for reduced length and profile, as well as trunking exhaust through one funnel to improve arcs of fire for the AA guns. 2 boiler rooms allowed redundancy in the event one was hit, but increased the risk if there was a hit at the midpoint between the 2. The risk associated with this was deemed to be low enough to compensate for the added benefits. The armament of the ships was based on the Tribals, but reduced in the number of 4.7-inch guns from 4 twin turrets to 3 twin turrets, to allow another bank of torpedo tubes. The torpedo tubes themselves had finally been upgraded to quintuples or pentad launchers, allowing a heavy torpedo load of 10 torpedoes to be carried, and they possess no dedicated high-angle rangefinder. Instead, a 12-foot rangefinder was carried behind the DCT, or the Direct-to-Control Tower, modified to allow the main armament to be used as an AA. They also possessed a fuse-keeping lock, allowing increased lethality against their targets when paired with radar. The Javelin's pennant flag would be changed from F-61 to G-61 in May of 1940, right as the Second World War began, and as one of the most powerful destroyers the Royal Navy had at the outbreak of the war, she was committed extensively. On the 29th of November 1940, Javelin took part in a night action against the destroyers of Z-10 Hans Lodi, the Richard Bateson, and also the Carl Golster, which resulted in Javelin being struck by at least 2 torpedoes and losing both the bow and the stern of the ship. Of the 108 meters of the original ship, only 47 meters remained. The Javelin was successfully towed back to the UK, where she would undergo major repairs, entailing replacing the bow and also the stern, eventually being redeployed in March of 1942, almost 2 years after she had been damaged. In May of 1942, Javelin participated in Operation Ironclad, or the Battle of Madagascar. Soon after, in June of 1942, she would participate in the ill-fated Operation Vigorous, an attempt to escort convoy MW-11 to Malta. Javelin did not take any serious damage in either operation. In May of 1943, Javelin returned to the UK to undergo a refit, completed by February of 1944. She would continue to participate in various roles until the end of the war, where she was then reduced to reserve status in 1946, ultimately being sold for scrap in 1949. Basically, the major refits were stuff like the secondaries. So, for example, this thing by the end had 6 4.7-inch guns, 6 20mm Oerlikons, and 4 40mm pom-poms on top of the torpedoes, and of course the depth charges as well. The next vehicle is for Japan, and it's the IJN Patrol Boat No. 102. This article is incredibly hard to read and has a bunch of mistakes in it, so I thought I would just give you the summary. Basically, what this vehicle was a Clemson-class destroyer, which was from America, laid down as the USS Stuart. It basically fought for America, and then, during the Second World War, ended up getting damaged by the Japanese, and then, after being damaged by the Japanese, it was kind of left for dead. So, the Japanese took it, refitted it, and actually used it on their side. And then eventually, it actually got once again taken back by the Americans and used on their side too. So this is a vehicle that technically fought for both sides of the war. The initial weapon system in IJN service was a Krupp 7.5cm model 1903 gun. There was 2 of those. Then you had some Browning 50 cals, some Type 3 6.5 machine guns, and also a depth charge thrower and depth charges too. Then they did some refits on it where they added some more guns to it, but generally wasn't exactly great. But yeah, that's its basic story. We have another Mogador class for the French, the Volta specifically. During the 1920s, the French Navy was trying to find a way to rebuild a fleet with more modern equipment and tactics. Although the Washington Treaty had limited the size of its fleet and the scope of its modernization, anti-sub warfare combined with a radical change of doctrine drove the Navy to focus on construction of brand new versatile ships that would act as much as destroyers as they would like cruisers. From this idea came the contre-torpilleurs, or super destroyers. After several generations of contre-torpilleurs, the idea of a destroyer leader that could spearhead the escort of fast battleships, at this time the Dunkirk class, gave birth to an even bigger destroyer, capable of destroying any warship smaller than a cruiser, the new Mogador class. 2 ships were built, the Mogador and also the Volta. Benefiting from superior armament compared to its predecessors, with 4 twin turrets, a 40-knot speed, and torpedo tubes on each side of the ship, they reached 3,000 to 4,000 tons, despite numerous arrangements to limit the weight. The enhancements compared to the Fantastique class, however, made them much better high-sea ships than previously contre-torpille classes, more stable and capable of reaching 34 knots even in moderate sea states. During its tests, Volta was able to sustain a speed of 41.63 knots for an hour, and its sister ship, the Mogador, was able to get to 43.45 knots. The Mogador class had 2 major flaws though. First, the electrical system of the ship wasn't powerful enough to generate enough current for the multitude of machinery and guns on the ship. Sacrifices were made in order to cram a light cruiser inside a destroyer, and this resulted in slowed down equipment, especially the turrets and the rudder, which impacted the ship's maneuverability. The other big flaw was the poorly designed turrets, which proved disastrous during the first trials of the ship. Ultimately, after numerous corrections, a max rate of fire of 9 rounds per minute for each gun was achieved, but hardly in sustained fights. The difficulties encountered demanded a complete overhaul that could never be made, as the war ended the development of the new loading systems. The Volta first escorted convoys in the Atlantic to protect them from German commerce raiders. It joined after that British forces to hunt unsuccessfully the Gneisenau and also the Scharnhorst battleships. After an overhaul and refit in Brest, it left Brest during the Battle of France and joined with its sister ship, the Forster Raid Fleet, in Mers el Kabir, where it was attacked by the British Navy in July. During the battle, it fired 88 shells at British destroyers in what was, according to its captain, the best performance of its career. It then safely escorted battleship Strasbourg to Toulon, and it was there that it remained, enhanced with a new AA platform in 1941, until its demise in 1942, as it was scuttled with the rest of the fleet during Operation Anton. This vehicle had 8 138mm MLE 1934 cannons in dual mounts. It had 2 37mm MLE 1933 AA cannons, 2 25mm Hotchkisses, 4 13.2 Hotchkisses as well, and then also 8 7.5mm Dahn machine guns, along with some torpedoes, mines, and depth charge racks too. For helicopters, we have the MD-500E. The story starts with the MD-500 though, which is a light civilian and military helicopter designed by McDonnell Douglas, and also Hughes helicopters before 1984 when they were sold to McDonnell Douglas. Following the US Army's requirement for a light observation helicopter in the early 1960s, Hughes submitted their design, known as the Model 369. It would end up entering service with the US as the OH-6 Cayuse, with 1,420 being built. The OH-6 remains in service to this day with the Spanish Navy, Japanese Army, as well as multiple police departments in the US. At the same time, Hughes was working on a civilian variant of the Model 369, marketed as the Hughes 500, until 1984, when they were all renamed to MD-500. The MD-500 was introduced in 1967 and has also had attack helicopters derived from it, such as the MD-500 Defender, used across the world in South Korea, Finland, Israel, and many others, and once again is still in service to this day in many roles. The MD-500D was an improved variant of the MD-500 and included a better engine, a T-shaped tail, and a 5-blade main rotor, which replaced the former 4-bladed one. The MD-500E, though, was developed in 1982 following on from the 500D, and the improvements included a pointed nose and more internal space for the crew. It was a generally small upgrade from the 500D. In the early 1980s, McDonnell Douglas received an order for 102 MD-500 helicopters from the Delta Avia Fluggerät, a West German export firm. From 83 to 85, 86 of these were delivered to the company, supposedly to export to Japan, Nigeria, Portugal, and Spain. However, all of these helicopters ended up in North Korea. They had been smuggled in, and the company was a ghost company, a front with the sole purpose of getting the helicopters to the DPRK. The MD-500E is a small and relatively basic helicopter. With the 5-bladed main rotor, it seats 4, 1 pilot and 3 passengers, although in North Korean service this is likely 1 pilot and 1 weapons operator. It has a 420 horsepower engine, giving it an OK top speed of 251 km an hour. While relatively underpowered, it has pretty good agility, and similar to the Lahatut, which we already see around. The MD-500s that arrived in the DPRK weren't armed at all. They were purely civilian models. However, at some point between their arrival in 1985 and then their first public display, which was in 2013, they were armed with 2 9M14 Malyutka ATGMs, which in North Korea are known as the Bulse-1 or the Susongs, on either side, so it had a total of 4 missiles. The Bulse-1 is obviously an M-close ATGM with 400mm of pen and 3 km of range, and a maximum speed of 140 meters per second. The MD-500 has also been seen with 2 9M14s and 2 9M111-2s, which are known as the Bullseye 2 in North Korea. It's unclear how many are actually armed, but the fact that some were shown is kind of crazy. So that's the suggestions passed to developers for November 2024. As always, look after yourselves, keep yourselves warm. I'll see you soon. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.